number, huh?
No, you can if you want, but
No, I can hear you. Where's Kathy?
that's
Yeah,
what
what'd
we
you
were
do with her?
wondering.
Oh,
She's gonna make me
she's
go up there and get her. She's in Irvine, right?
Yep.
she's in Whittier.
Oh my goodness. Nixon country.
Yeah, she's a little bit further away from that place. What are you guys doing?
Well, right now we're just screwing around.
Oh,
Waiting for Kathy to make her
all right.
appearance.
And I'm testing the recording.
Huh. You're recording this?
Yeah, we're trying this out
Dennis,
on.
okay. Dennis, were you going to do your part 3 or
Yep.
something?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I just sent Kathy in.
She was on there. We're on Google Hangouts, and we lost her.
Oh, you
Oh,
know
now
what it
you're.
is? It's the pool guy.
Oh, okay. She's probably.
Yeah, she's probably dealing with the pool guy.
Oh. So you're using GoToMeeting. Does that cost us or you something?
Well, this is my company account, or my work
Don't
account.
say that too loud.
Well, I'm going to stop the recording and then start up because I don't want to have to pass this off to my son and get him to edit it for me.
Mm-hmm. And Cindy's sick, and oh, this is Dennis's screen. I see.
Yes, this is mine. I'm just getting everything set up here.
Okay, I will be.
Oop. Okay. We're going to talk about the migration I did for an ONET employment job board. The ONET information stuff is information published by the government that organizes job information into skill set, your education set, your experience set, lists the tasks commonly associated with the job. It has a list of jobs, and basically when you have a job, when you post a job, these are all the things you want to pick from to create the job. And so last week we talked about the data, and if you look at the website I sent out last week, you'll find an article up there on the data and on the ONET requirements. It talks about the data, the migration, also the code is posted up there. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is...
Dennis, could you possibly maximize this window?
That is maximized.
Are you sure? Up in the right top?
Yeah. Let me, hold on, I'm going to... Let me see, hold on. Oop. I'm going to see if I can switch to my laptop directly. We may need to we're going to need to restart the recording. Copy selection.
Not a problem.
About migration.
You want to start the recording?
I did.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, on Web Enabled there is a site, and I gave it out last week. I don't remember what the site name was, but it has all the code for the migration I did for ONET, which was a government database that we wanted to migrate into Drupal. And the data came in SQL format, and I took it from the SQL format and moved it into Drupal taxonomies and content types. And the website is I don't know if you can see that. Full screen zoom control. You can't. The website is onet, O-N-E-T, period, H-E, Henry Edward, 4197.vps.webenabled.net. And I will post that link in the chat. I can figure out where the chat is. There we go. So that has one article that has the migration code and another article that has the data dictionary for the ONET data. And I believe this actually has a working version of the software. The username is admin and the password is squirt, S-Q-U-I-R-T 12, I think. Oh, cool. It does have a working version. Okay. So we're going to look at the code, and then we're going to look at the code, and then we're going to look at it in operation. There we go. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is go look at the code. Rather than import the data into the Drupal site, we kept the data in a separate database. Now the problem with this is we now have two databases, and Drupal by default only addresses one. So there are two ways to do this. I happen to copy this code from Drupal 6, so that's why I did it this way. In the next week or two, I'm going to go back and modify it to do it the Drupal 7 way. But basically, the Drupal 6 way is in your settings PHP. You go in there and you define the second database, which on the screen here is line 228 through 239. And basically you give it the name of the database, which is SoftSync ONET, and then you tell it the driver of the database. The database here on line 233, that is the actual database that you have in PHPMyAdmin. And then the username and password, that's your PHPMyAdmin username. So that when this site boots up, it actually has access to multiple websites. The problem with this is done in settings PHP, which is a pain in the butt to get to. The Drupal 7 way, remember I was doing a Drupal 6 migration. The Drupal 7 way actually builds this. How do I? Let me go find the file. I loaded the wrong file in here. Open file. Module or migrate. We'll just open all of them. Yeah, this is in your, what they do here in Drupal 7, you actually stick that code in, you actually make that part of your code. So I will go ahead and rewrite mine so that it runs in Drupal, so it's more in line with Drupal 7. I didn't have the chance to do it because it's more than just adding this line here, or this couple lines. Basically, line 8, you tell it you're going to add another connection, you give it the what we're going to call it internally, and I don't know what that second parameter of default is, it's just there. And then you tell it that the database that we're going to call JNNXOOPS is a MySQL, and it connects to the database name JNN_XOOPS. Username is root, and your host is local password or localhost, and your prefix is null. Does everybody know what that prefix is, just out of curiosity? Can anybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
prefix for the table names.
Yeah, you can have multiple. I guess you can prefix your table names in the MySQL database, and so this you put a parameter in here and it just automatically tacks that on. I've seen a couple of hosting services do it. I'm not quite sure the purpose of it, but it's
Yeah,
there.
my server does that. It automatically prefixes the tables with the username on the account, actually.
Yeah, in shared environments you get that a lot.
Okay.
The other thing is that if you've got like a limited number of databases, you can actually kind of host all your tables and whatnot in the same database if you set them with different prefixes.
Right.
Okay.
It's a cheesy hack, but sometimes you got to do it.
It works. Yeah, but if you notice the fields on the migrate user are the same as the fields in your settings PHP. So like I said, I will rewrite the code so that it uses the Drupal 7 way of doing it. The only reason I didn't do it this way is your database connections are a little bit different when you're doing it the Drupal 7 way. This down here, I wish this editor had the ability to do split screens, but so if you notice, the query is database get connections default and the database names on migrate taxonomy. It's this select that's a little bit different. It's very, very similar, but there's just a couple minor differences, and I just didn't have the time to get it debugged. So I remember when I tried it before, it was just, I can't remember what the differences were, but there was a couple of minor differences. So, okay, so we're going to move on. But anyhow, this is how you would do it in the Drupal 7. You have a database get connect, and you specify all the information here. You do not, you specify this code here, line 8 through 14. You specify your connection where it's supposed to look at, and then down here when you get your connection, you tell it, go look in JNS Ops and select this file from JNS XOps. And that JNS XOps is defined on line 8. So that's how it knows where to go look. If you were just connecting to your normal database, it would be default. Okay. Okay, so the top of the code here basically tells it that this is the migrate API and we're going to have all these classes. I think this is where it registers the classes, is my understanding. David, is that what it's doing, or? It's making the migration module aware that these classes exist.
Yes, it's.
Okay.
Yeah, you're defining those classes there.
Yes.
And what
that's used for is we see our ONet occupation here. If we come look at our user interface, we see the ONet occupation, the migration here, so that when we tell this job we want to run the ONet migration, it knows to run the class ONet occupation migration. So that's what that's doing. It's one of the things it's doing is giving us a name on this screen.
Dennis, a question?
Yes, sir.
What do you mean by run the class?
We can migrate. Each one of these classes here is basically a function to import one table.
Yeah. Okay, so if I understand the way this works, there's a set procedure, if you will, that does the migration.
Yes.
And
we'll get to it in just a second.
yeah, and in this case, this is where polymorphism comes in, right? You hand it the class, and it doesn't necessarily know what the class is, but it knows what it can do with it, and so it does. And this way, you can have different behavior for each different class of object. And the manipulating code doesn't actually need to know what type it's dealing with beyond some very basic information.
Okay.
It would be good to see that function.
We're gonna go look at the function in just a minute.
Great.
But basically, all we're doing is defining. And here's one thing I haven't quite figured out. Notice that these names over here on the migration are coming from the class name is my best guess, except it strips off the migration off each one of these. The migration module does this. When this function is run, the migration module looks at this stuff somehow and says, okay, I know my class name is ONet occupation migration, but in my list of migrations, I'm just going to list everything up to the word migration because there's no reason. I've already told you this is the migration, which it got from here. So there's no reason to tell you that this is the ONet occupation migration that's in the migration column. So they just strip off the word migration, basically.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay. So let's go take a look at this stuff. So we have one class here called ONet migration, which extends the migration defines a class called migration. And it does whatever it's supposed to do to create when you create a migration, it does a whole bunch of stuff we don't know about, we don't care because it does it automatically. It's part of the inheritance. When I say we're going to extend migration, it says, okay, well, I'm going to go out and do everything that migration does for you, plus whatever other stuff you write here in your function. Is that correct, David?
Yes.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. So it's going to go out, it declares a public function called construct. It goes and calls its parent function construct. It does whatever it does, and then we come back and we're going to declare an array here of who's on the team. Now it just happened to be me, so we my name, my email address, and what my job title was. And that shows up over here in the user interface under content migration. Where is, registration.
Can I ask a quick question, David or Dennis? Is this the constructor function of this class? Because it's, what is that public function underscore construct?
Yeah. Okay. Well. Okay.
I don't
So
know PHP is like Java. Java has the constructor inside the class. You don't have to mark it extra as a function, a constructor function.
well, yeah, it is a function, but it's got the same name as a class. That's how Java, C++, and C# for that matter. That's how they know that. Yeah, this is a constructor and not necessarily a function you call. And I think in object-oriented PHP they use this double underscore construct, and then its presence within the class indicates that it's a constructor.
Right.
Oh, I
and
see.
what happens is the reason it's declared as a function is you're going to see that when we get into down here into the individual classes, the first thing we're going to do is call our parent construction function, which is right here, public function construction. And what it does is it calls its parent function called construct that's sitting up here in migration.
Basically, it instantiates an instance of migration is what constructors
Yes.
are doing. What constructors are doing
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
Cindy,
yeah,
Cindy
that-
and Kat,
Yeah.
Cindy and Kathy.
Right.
Right.
This is
So, and,
this is pretty typical behavior. So you're extending a class. If you're going to do that, all you want to do is the new stuff. So the old stuff you pass off to the class you're inheriting from, and that would be the parent.
yeah, so I'm not sure this is a good way to do it, but basically,
Doesn't it work the same way in JavaScript? Does anyone know?
I
No.
don't know JavaScript.
Yeah.
Oh, I've,
Probably.
Yeah.
yeah, I've been reading some, object-oriented,
Yeah, probably because
and it really looks familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah. To create a
So-
constructor, right?
right, to instantiate
Which just
class.
constructs a class. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
yeah, so the way you can think of it graphically is this, we're three steps down, but when this gets executed, the first thing it does is call the function that's here in its parent, and the first thing ONet migration does is call its parent's constructor. So it does its thing for construction, then returns here. It does the ONet migration, does the rest of the code for construction, and then when you finally get to the ONet occupation migration, it finishes out the construction.
Right. And one thing to keep in mind, we're talking about an instance of the class. So we're actually talking about a chunk of data that represents the class we're working with.
Okay, so for every row we have is an instance? So each
Well,
row's an instance?
not necessarily. I mean, in this case, we're
Actually,
we're-
it's the table.
yeah. This is a way of accessing the table,
Right.
right?
But
And
this gets, yes, so when we create the table, or when we convert the table,
you'll start
this stuff
creating.
happens once, and then within the ONet is where we go into our loop.
Yes,
The
yes.
ONet occupation migration, within here, we
Yeah, but
do
you're not
loop.
you're not creating the tables or rows in the database. They exist separately from the functionality. You're just creating the functionality, or
No, we're actually creating the rows in the table. We're reading.
yeah. I mean, but the ONet occupation migration, yeah, you do that within the class of
Yes.
ONet occupation migration.
Yes.
And what you're doing when you construct, you're constructing an instance of the functionality. So you're making it live and saying, go do your thing. And then you create the tables and rows, but the tables and rows are not
Right.
part of the class or the instance that you're
Yeah.
creating.
What you're doing
Right.
here is you're creating a special purpose interface to the database.
Right. So interface is also a loaded word.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's a very good, concise explanation for someone like me.
It's about all I can understand at this point. It gets a little bit unwieldy when you start thinking about everything that's happening. So this is my safe little world. Okay, so in the ONet, so ONet migration extends migration. And basically I already tell us the team members, and if we had an open atrium, we can connect, we can define this pattern, and as we go through the migration, we can attach each migration class to a specific open atrium issue. Has everybody used open atrium?
I have.
I haven't.
Cindy?
No, I haven't.
Okay,
No.
Open Atrium is like a project management system that's built on Drupal, and it's kind of the standard Drupal project management tool. And in there you have cases, and basically the key to the case is your website and your node, your path to your node, and then your node ID. So what we do is we define this pattern here on line 28. So as we go through the rest of the code, we can just specify, we can say this class is associated with node 25, and it creates the URL automatically by just telling it the name. Okay. I don't have it on this migration, but I have it in another one. But that's what this is for. And if you look, we can come over here to our migration. If we, on our user interface, if we click on the ONet migration, it will tell us, one of the things it gives us is the overview, who's the implementer, and that comes from here. If I change that, that will change over here. Let's see. Okay, save that. And do I refresh, or I got to clear my? I may have to
I
clear
bet
my
it's
cache.
a flush the cache, yeah.
Yeah. And I did save that, didn't I? Yes. So anyhow, we're going to go on to, okay. I don't know what I did wrong, but what shows up here should have shown up here. Maybe that's hard-coded to implement. I'm not sure. Okay, so that's our basics. That defines the overall migration. Because this is going to be this. Now the thing is, this is the same for if I do one migration or if I do 500 migrations, 500 tables. This information is the same for all of them. So I don't have to define it once per class or once per table. I'm defining it once. And then all my other classes, when they extend this class, automatically get this information. So let's go take a look at term. This is the taxonomies. What I did is it suggested that you have one table or one file per type of thing that you're moving. So you have one for taxonomy, one for users, one for files, one for images, one for content type, and so on down the line. That just makes trying to find stuff a lot easier. So here we have our class ONet migration, which we defined early on, and we said it is going to define the, and we tell it to map. This is telling it the key to our incoming table. This is our key to our source table. And then we define where that source can be found. In this case, it's found on the SoftSync ONet database with the table occupational data, which will be known as OD, and then we tell it what fields we want. And we do a left join and to the job zone, and we pull in a field from the job zone. And then we tell it how we want it sorted. That's nothing more than a straight SQL statement. And the reason we use the functions instead of writing our own SQL statement is that way Drupal will be able to interface to any of the databases it connects to, and we don't have to do anything. If Drupal is connecting to a DB2, it formats the SQL statement for DB2. If it's connecting to a SQL server, it formats it for SQL server. We don't have to worry about that in our code. In Drupal 6 prior, you had to figure all that out. Okay, so now we're going to tell it we want to create a new query. And basically, I don't know if it's at this point it actually creates the query or when the magic happens. And then we tell it our destination. In this particular case, we have a taxonomy term called occupation data. And occupation data is structured taxonomies, occupational data. So manage fields, and there's our definition. And by telling this line here, by telling our destination's occupational data, it says, oh, I know what that is. And it goes and gets the schema for that taxonomy. All this is brought in automatically by this one statement. That's all I got to do. And it goes out and gets all the information it knows about occupational data. Up here, for my source, I had to tell it everything. Down here, I just says, okay, we're going to use taxonomy occupational data. And it says, oh, okay, cool. I know what you're doing. And then we have to map the fields. Basically, we tell it the input fields and where they're going to go. Now, for whatever reason, and it's just the way it is, you would think it's copied from field A to field B. No. Field A, the first field here, is the destination field. The second field is the source field. So this is saying we're going to move stuff from the second into the first. Don't know why, just the way it is. It's a bit. I found it a bit confusing, but it's just the way it is. Now, if you notice down here, we have unmapped destinations. Now, the reason for that, remember, okay, I just figured out, dummy, why this didn't change, why the implementer didn't change. This code here is on my local machine. This is on web enabled. So if I had changed code on my local machine and it changed on web enabled, that would really be a little scary. So that's why the code didn't change, because we're on two different machines here. Okay, so here's the destination. And the source here, this is the source is defined in our query. We tell it what fields we want. That's where the source comes from. And then down here in the mapping, which is lines 97 through 109, we see here on the mapping tab. And if you notice, the first four have data in them, and the last ones don't. That's because if you look at the code, there is no fields being mapped into them. The reason you want to map these fields is because if you do not map them, they'll show up here as red saying, I don't know what to do with these fields. So it's in your own best interest. You don't have to do anything with them, because if the migrate module doesn't see any data going into them, it just won't do anything with them. But the problem is you don't know if you've accounted for every field, because you've got 5 red ones. How do you know that one of those 5 shouldn't have data in them? So you explicitly, my recommendation is that you explicitly set every field. Now there's another function, I don't have it here, but it's a add unmigrated function. Do I have it? I'm going to go back but basically you can do this again with Drupal. There, multiple ways to do something. One way is just add field mapping with no source. The other way is to add a field mapping that says we're not mapping this field. And the purpose of that function is to say to turn off this red flag here, so that you have specifically addressed that field. Says, yeah, I know about this field, but I'm not going to map it. I don't care about it. Okay. Now the other thing you can do, I don't think it's on this one. Let's go back. For whatever reasons, the sequence that appears in the migration is not necessarily the sequence you coded it in. Never bothered to go back and check. It's not alphabetical, so I'm not quite sure what the sequence is. But one of the things you can do, let's see. This is defining the same. This is just defining a different taxonomy, the content reference. Same structure, get, connect, select fields. There's no join here. Create your query, create the source. We're going to migrate this to the taxonomy content reference. Here's our key to our source. Notice up above, I defined the key first and then had the query, and here I had the query and then the key. It doesn't really matter and that's one of the things I don't understand about the object part of this, is because I have my query, then I define my key in one section, and in the other one I define my key first, and then define my query. So I don't quite understand how that works. You know, in a procedural process, I would have defined the key first and then my query. Dave, you got any suggestions on this? Or I guess maybe it doesn't really matter. You just have to define all the stuff and then migrate does its magic. Dave?
Yeah. I don't think this is order, and this is, you know, you haven't actually started executing anything yet. You're still defining
Actually,
stuff.
yes, we have. Because if you come over here to the user interface, it knows all the rows. So it's gone through your REST, and it's gone through your,
It's probably,
maybe that's part of the migrate magic. Maybe
well,
it's just read the
you know,
code and built its tables.
you know, those are
Because it knows-
general. Hold on a second. Those are general pieces of information. You don't necessarily need to know the structure of the database table to get them. I can get the number of rows
That's true.
without
All you
actually
do is
not.
count.
Yeah, the only thing I need, I don't even need to know the columns.
But it does do the selection, because if you change your selection, you change your join, or you put selection criteria in your SQL statement, the row count changes. And I know that for a fact because I changed it. I changed my selection criteria and my count changed because I was curious as to whether it's just counting the entire table or if it was just counting what I wanted. So like on this work styles, I forget what the selection I put in, but instead of coming up with 14,752, it came up with 2,500 and some rows. So it's executing at least part of that select statement.
Yeah, but you like I said, you can get schema information without actually knowing the column structure or anything. So,
Okay.
plus you can also go into the table and query the column names. So,
but here's the other thing right now is we're not writing a conversion program. We're writing functions that the migration process is going to call.
Yeah, and
so
they haven't actually been executed. They're just being declared.
Right. Well, some of them that have, like I said, some of this is executed because it goes out and gets your row counts.
Sure, but it may be executed at a later time.
But it executed enough of your SQL to get your row counts.
Right.
Because as soon as, I'm sorry, let me back up. As soon as I declare a function, I haven't run it. The mere fact that I went back and stuck it in this migrate ONet migrate API, as soon as I add a class here, it appears on this report with the total row count without me running that class. So the mere fact that you add it to here causes this view to change.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that works.
That's the magic of migration. So it goes through. So, but basically, remember, we're not writing the entire migration. We're just writing chunks of it. And the migration is doing a whole lot more. It goes out, does all the reads for you, and hands you the record. And then you can process it and give it back to it. So we're just writing little stubs or functions to be called by the migrate module. So, okay, so map the fields. And basically you just keep repeating this pattern for every different taxonomy you got or every different class you have. Now, in Drupal 6 that's true, in Drupal 7 that's not true because a content type might be comprised of 15, 20 different tables. So you're migrating the content, you're migrating the objects. So I guess the better way to phrase this is that each class migrates an object. And an object in this case is a table. In Drupal 7, an object is going to be a collection of tables, but still relates to a single item. It's a content type, or a taxonomy, or a user, or so on and so on. So basically, so this is just more of the same. Category. Okay. This one's a little bit different. The ETE category. What I wanted it to do is I didn't want to do this migration until the ONet reference and the ONet scale references had been done. So I can put a dependency in here. Will it tell me? It doesn't. Okay, see these errors up here? This is telling me that I'm using a field I'm using it in a destination, but I don't have anything that's not in the list of destination fields. So again, when you run your migration code, you want to get rid of all those errors just so that you know that you've addressed every single field. Okay. I was looking to see if this told me that this was dependent upon the earlier stuff. It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't tell me it's dependent. Oh well, you just have to know it. But one of the things that it does do, if it's dependent upon an earlier conversion, it will make this conversion appear later in the list. So this is dependent upon ONet reference and ONet scale reference. So there's a scale reference and there's the ONet reference. So this won't appear until after both of those. So when you look at this list of migrations, these are in dependent order. This one has no dependence, that one has no dependence, that one has no dependence, and that one has no dependence. So they're listed in the order that migration wants it listed. But the rest of the stuff has dependencies. So they're all going to be, the dependencies are listed after everything they depend upon. So there's our array of dependencies, so that forces it to the bottom. And let's see, get default. So we got our field, we're going to connect to the ETC categories. And we're going to do a left join to the content model reference, and join to the scale reference, and we're going to order by these three fields. Create our new query, we define the key, and some of these can be multi-part keys. So if you do, you just define them. You define one, each element in the array is the key definition. And basically the name here is the name of that variable is the name it's going to have in the database table. So that's where you get these names from. So in line 527 here where it says element ID, if we were to go look at the ETC category, there'd be a field called element ID, which we did define right here. It actually comes from ETE. So all these fields that are used down here have to be defined in your query. Then we map the fields. Now, here we did, okay, not fields. Here we can actually tell it where the fields came from. So this field term EC element ID is actually coming from the ONet reference, and we put a description here. Let's go see. So this is the ETC categories migration. Okay, ETC categories and map done. And here's the description. If you look, the description that's in here, if we look at the description on line 578, look up element ID term, or look up element ID term ID. We see it in the description over here. So all this stuff that appears, everything that appears over here is coming from our code. And if we tell it we want to default to a value, we can specify the default here. So let's see. Description. There's a default. There we go. Here we have a default value. Now, all these. Oh, there we go. There's our default value. We're going to have the field term EC element ID, and we're just going to set it to the default value of TID, which means there's a variable somewhere that's called TID, which is taxonomy ID. And I know that because it comes from there. And it's the existing term ID. Let's see, so what else do we get? We go up and get our scale, all of our other fields that we need. And we do all of our mapping, and then our function's done. Now, oh, here we go. Here's the other code I was talking about. You can specify I don't know why that prepared, but you can tell it this is your unmigrated source fields are here. And I think this prepare row tells it that it's going to be processed by that function. But that way you have, when you come back to your source fields, source, you have everything addressed. Let's see, what is this one called? Element name and scale name. Yeah. Element and scale names. So it knows it's going to do something with them. And down here we have our mapping function called prepare rows, and there is where we set these source elements. So rather we're not getting our source elements from our source, we're actually making them up on the fly. And so prepare row is called when you initiate the migrate module. It reads a row in. Well, it does all that construct stuff first. And then as it reads a row in, it will then looks to see if there's a function called prepare row. If there is, it calls prepare row and passes it the current row data. And basically the current row is your source row. That's what your current row is. And so you can change, you can manipulate any of this data. Actually, you can do anything you want, but one of the things you can do is manipulate the data in your source row. So in this one here, we only wanted to take there are 15 rows per item. This is how do I explain this? Okay, a job might have 10, 20, 30 traits that are important for this. A CEO has to have an imagination, or has to be forward-looking. So it's got all these traits. Well, we weren't interested in keeping all 16 or 20 traits. We just wanted the first 9. So I have to have a count where once I get to the first 9, I want to skip all the rest. Is that what I'm doing here? Oh, no. We're going to do that in another one. I'm sorry. This isn't the one we're doing it. So all I want to do here is if If the pair row is empty, we're just going to return false. I don't know why that's there, but when I looked in the code, everybody had that. So I put it in there. And oh, okay. The parent class, for some reason, might want to ignore a row. Don't know why, but that's why it's there. So we extract our data from our incoming row. And then in my particular case, I rebuild the element ID to be element ID, scale ID, and category. And then I put something in the category description. And then I return the rows to saying I'm done with this. So I came in here, when I originally came in here, my element ID just had itself. But I concatenated on the scale ID and category. And I also concatenated on the category and category description onto element name and stuck that in a field called category description. And then category description, if we look back up in here somewhere, is migrated to some, there you go, category description is migrated into the description field. So I took an incoming field that, and I manipulated it and stuck it back in that variable, put it back in current row, and says, okay, migrate, now you can have it. So I took the incoming row, modified it to be the data I wanted, and then gave it back to migrate. It says, okay, go ahead and migrate this data. Did everybody see what I did there? I guess that's a yes.
No, actually, that was a mute.
Ooh.
Yes.
Okay. It's way past our time. I've got one other thing, and then we'll be done. This is on the content type. That's all, you know, defining your key, defining your source data, all your joins, your order by, map the fields, add your fields, add field mappings, source migration. Oh, the source migrations. This is a cool thing. Now I remember what this is. When we did this ONet SOC code, which was ONet SOC code was, I think, the occupational data. What it does is it builds an internal cross-reference to say, okay, the ONet SOC code of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 has a node ID of 2. And it keeps a cross-reference from the old key to the new node ID. And when you do this source migration, it says, okay, as I get every field in here, I'm not going to give you, even though I'm coming in here with the value of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what the migrate's going to do for me is, oh, okay, I'm going to take this key, I'm going to go to my ONet occupation cross-reference table I built when I did the ONet occupation, and I'm going to take the old key and go look up the node ID, and I'm going to substitute the node ID for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to stick that in my source field. Does everybody see what happened there? So your original data coming in, data, and during the ONet conversion, ONet migration, it says, I know the old key was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but the node ID, when I wrote it out to Drupal, was a 7. So now down here in this other migration, when you tell me my data coming in is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it was in the ONet migration, I'm going to go to my cross-reference table that I built for you, and I'm going to look up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to replace that value with the node ID. And this is how when you're bringing in tables that are like from outside that are, this is how you do your, foreign key cross-reference. Because you build all your foreign keys first, and then when you bring your data in, you tell it, okay, this key came from my state conversion. This key came from my county conversion. This key came from my college name, college code. This field came from my tax ID, or tax location code, or my county tax code. And Feeds doesn't do that. Feeds brings in a field and processes all those fields. Migration allows you to relate other migrations to this one. And that's one of the big powers of migration, is that you can you have a relational database coming in, and if you remember, Drupal has its own keys. When you set up a title of anything, that's not the key in Drupal. It's the node ID or the taxonomy ID or all that stuff. When you set up a taxonomy, we give it a name of California. That's not the key to Drupal. If we go look, does everybody understand that, know that?
Yes, there's a...
Yeah, anything that goes in a database has an ID,
Right.
pretty much.
Right, exactly. And that's one of the big things that the migration module does for you. Cross-references allows you to cross-reference all that stuff by simply saying, yeah, the source for this is this migration. And it goes and grabs the new key.
Yeah. It maintains
So-
referential integrity.
Exactly. And anything else here? This source, unmigrated source fields we talked about. Oh, here's your two. Unmigrated source and your unmigrated destination fields. Again, this just says, I'm not going to migrate them, so take them off the checklist so they don't appear as a red mark. Prepare row. In this prepare row function, this is the one where we're doing our counts. So when we get to a count of, where is it, row count, yeah, we get to a row count of 9, we return false. If it's less than 9, we process the row. Now the one thing that's important to note is if you update any rows in this prepare row, because you can do anything you want. If you wanted to do something else, if you wanted to write a record out here, that's fine, but then you have to write a, remove row or something like that, or a backout row, because one of the things you can do is you can import this stuff, and you can also do a rollback. So that, okay, I imported 40, but they didn't work, so I just want to roll it back. I'm going to make my change, and then I'm going to re-import it. Well, on this rollback, anything that you did in the prepare row section, that updated table, you have to put in a rollback row to undo whatever you did. Otherwise, your database gets screwed up. So we're well past our time. We can, if you want more, there's not much more left, probably about another half hour, but whatever. You got the gist of it, and if anybody's got specific questions or needs help, I'll be glad to answer any questions. And the code is out there. Next time, if you want, we can run some of this stuff if you want. Totally up to you guys, but I'm done for the evening. There's a lot to this stuff. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the understatement of the day, Dennis.
So now
Oh.
you see, before you know about migrations, it's inscrutable. Once you know about migrations, it becomes merely difficult.
Yeah, you've enlightened me a little bit. It was, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying
Yeah.
I get it all by any means, but some of it at least makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah.
And I can see the difference between migrating feeds now.
Yeah, the big
I get
power
that.
is the cross-reference, the
Yeah.
relational integrity.
Yeah, that's huge. Hey, I'm going to stop the recording at this point.
Okay.